Happy Halloween. My name is Karis. Welcome to a very special Fix Your Shitty Movement. The top 5 horrible cues you may have been given by a coach or a trainer that is contributing to your shitty squat. Number 1, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll die on this hill, toes forward, narrow stance. That does not work for most people. And why people are being told to squat that way, I'm not sure. Maybe the ideal human form should be to squat that way, but in my experience, most people cannot squat that way. And the easiest way to fix someone's squat, very first Fix Your Shitty movement ever, turn your toes out, open your stance a little wider, and play around. Find what feels good in your body. If you've been told to squat with your toes forward in a narrow stance and you can't hit depth, your back hurts, your knee hurts, your hips hurt, it just never feels right. But then you're able to open up a little bit and suddenly you're able to move, it feels a lot easier, nothing hurts. That's probably the way that you should do it. Number 2, lift your toes up and sit back in your heels. Now, that advice is never right. Don't do that. You guys already know how I feel about the feet. Now, that advice is given in like a group setting when you have a bunch of these motherfuckers you've never seen before in your life with a barbell on their back, and you're trying to keep them safe and not have them squat like this, right? Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to get someone to not squat up on their toes or with their knees forward. Why is that horrible advice? Because you need to be attached to the ground. When you lift your toes up, you are not stable. And when you lift your toes up, you probably can't hinge very well, at least not for long, right? So you wind up squatting like that, right? Which is really the way that you will wind up squatting in all of these things that I'm mentioning to you today. Number 3, look up. Horrible advice when it's given generally. Lots of powerlifters do actually look up when they squat. I used to. I've kind of changed it around a little bit. But that's what you should do. You should try different things, see what works for you, try other things, see if that works better or feels better or whatever, and then go with that. And you're always allowed to change it. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one fucking way of moving, right? I digress. Some of the best coaches I know cue people or teach them to look up, right? And to really try to extend their thoracic spine in their squat. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when it's given in a very general group setting to try to get people to do number 4, and that is keep an upright torso. So those things go hand in hand. They're a little different though, because one cranks on the neck, right? And the other one cranks on your back and your hips, right? So especially for tall people, like if you have long femurs, if you try to squat like that, you're probably not hitting depth and it's probably really uncomfortable. And it's not because of mobility, it's because the length of your fucking joints or bones or whatever the fuck. So if you're trying to squat upright and you have a long leg, like where is it gonna go? The only way is if you lean forward to allow space for your hip to move in your hip socket, okay? So both of those things also put you in extension of your spine. Again, for powerlifters, if it's done well, if you're keeping this engaged and lifting up here, right, there's a way to do it. But it's very technique specific. If you're just doing this, right, you can see, once again, how I'm extended in my low back, right? It's kind of same thing, trying to stay upright in my squat. And just really not being able to move very far, right? Same thing happens with the toes forward, right? Just to review. And then there's number 5, which is the spookiest. And that is that squatting to depth hurts your knees. Says who? So if you're talking to a bunch of like old competitive powerlifters and they have fucked up knees, yeah, they competed in powerlifting. We're all rotting in our skin suits as we speak. Do you know what else is really bad for your knees? Running. But you never ever get people like stopping runners on the street, like lecturing them like, oh my God, man, you gotta stop, you're gonna fuck up your knees. But for some reason, someone lifts up lifts a weight and everybody freaks the fuck out about everything that it can do to your body, when it's actually one of the safest sports that you can participate in because there's so much variety. When you're running, right, you're in this plane, right, for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 4 hours, whatever. When you're powerlifting, right, when you're squatting, you have a squat day and you have a deadlift day and you have a bench day, right, and a lot of variety. Yeah, if you do it at like a high volume, or just fucking because that's the way you are, you could hurt your knees, absolutely. But it's no more dangerous than really any other activity that you do long-term in a competitive way. Do I think running is dangerous and you shouldn't run? No. I have no interest in running. I ran for years and my knees were fucked up. But if it makes you happy and it gets you moving and you just love it, then fucking do it. I don't care. It's fine. You can do whatever you want, and you should do whatever you want because life is short and joy is hard to find on this planet. So give your skin suit some fun. And if that's running, fucking knock yourself out. Also, squatting high, right, is easy. So when you get the bros squatting, like posting their PR and they're doing like a quarter squat, yeah, that's not impressive at all because they're only going a quarter of the way. You can see this is a lot easier than that, right? And if you've squatted to depth, you know that extra inch or whatever, even below parallel, makes a huge difference. So depth means the crease of your hip is under the top of your knee, right? And that is a powerlifting standard for your squat. If you don't squat below depth, below parallel, your squat doesn't count. I train all of my clients as though we are preparing for a powerlifting meet. Not only because I want them to eventually compete, but also I want the integrity of their movement to be as sound as possible. Also, if you can squat to depth, you should squat to depth because you don't want to lose that mobility. And it does require a lot of mobility to get down there. You have to have upper spine mobility. You have to have ankle dorsiflexion. You have to have pretty good hip mobility, right? Does this mean most people can't squat? Watch my fix your shitty movement mobility squat thing. No, most people can, but you should absolutely try to keep that ability as long as you possibly can. Last thing I'll say about that is when you squat like this, you can see, right, all of my weight goes right into my knee. Versus if I squat to depth, my knee is free and clear, right? And that actually even gives me like a nice stretch on my quad in a working way, but that's what mobility is, right? So it's actually safer, in my experience, for people to squat below depth. Are there circumstances where people can't or shouldn't? Sure, absolutely. I have a client who's older, he has a knee replacement. There's no reason for him to squat to depth. He just wants to feel good, move better, be able to get on and off the can without any issues. Cool, we don't need to squat to depth. Now I have another client who has 2 knee replacements and he does squat to depth and he is hoping to compete in powerlifting and he's a badass. So those are 2 of same kind of instances or circumstances, but 2 very different outcomes. And that's really what your coach should be doing. Your coach should be looking at the way that you move, the way you present yourself, the way that they are experiencing these movements, and they're either going to try to make their thoughts, like, squat with your toes forward, better for you and try different things, or they're going to try to tell you that there's something wrong with you and your body and you need to try to get it done their way. Almost never is there 100% any way to do anything, right? And I've had clients who've had knee procedures who can't squat to depth yet. We're working on it. They posted a PR. It was a really big deal for us because of her rehab. And of course, some douchebag got in her DMs and was criticizing her for not going to depth. That's one of the things. Stop fucking giving unsolicited advice. You don't know what that person is doing. You don't know their health history. You don't know what their coach is doing with them. I have friends who are coaches who don't teach their clients to squat to depth, but They have their own thing. They have their own way of doing things. Usually it's because they want more of like an athletic component, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is that they're not saying we're not squatting to death because it's bad for you. They're saying we're gonna squat this way because whatever, right? And so when you're on Instagram, you're like, oh, look at this motherfucker not squatting to death. I'm gonna tell him, right? Actually, it's him to her usually. You don't know. You don't fucking know what they're doing, what their goals are, and you should probably mind your own fucking business. Now, when I see some bro, I know it's usually bros though, posting a PR of their squat and they're quarter squatting, there's absolutely something in my head that's like, look at that little bitch squat, right? But I'm not gonna get on Instagram and be like, that's not a real squat, blah, 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 right? So I hope the one thing that you guys can always take away from these fix your shitty movements is that you need to figure out the way your body moves and the way it likes to move. Don't try to force yourself to squat like me or whatever person you follow on Instagram. If that doesn't work for you, if you feel pain, if you're plateaued, if you can't hit depth easily, then maybe try something else. And if you've exhausted all the things that you know, it might be time to hire a coach. But remember, if they're trying to get you in a one-size-fits-all way to move anything and they're trying to blame your body for being unable to do something, you should probably find a different coach. My name is Karis. Happy Halloween. Stay safe. Squat better. Let's fix your shitty squat for the love of God. See you next time.